to Advancement Live. My name is Ryan Catherwood, coming to you live from the grounds of the University of Virginia here in beautiful Charlottesville. Advancement Live is a weekly show for higher education development, advancement, communications, alumni relations professionals. We broadcast on the Higher Ed Live Network, which is a product of Ed Universe Media. Make sure to mark your calendars every Tuesday. We try to put together a great show for you. This week, I am thrilled to introduce John Hill and Dan Clam, my guests for today. Before I get into their bios, however, do make sure to add some chatter to the back channel, which is #HigherEdLive. All three of us here on the program are following along, and we'll try to answer your questions as you put them up on Twitter. The hashtags, the handles for my guests at LinkedIn John and at Dan Clam. So do be sure to follow them if you are following the show live here at the moment. And let me first introduce my sponsors for the show. iModules is a leading constituent engagement management provider for educational institutions. iModules delivers an integrated online platform that transforms how institutions strengthen constituent relationships and achieve fundraising success. And one of our newer sponsors is Countermarch Systems. From registration to check-in and participation, Countermarch Systems provides software that alumni and staff love to use. We build comprehensive, easy-to-use systems that handle the complexities of reunions and homecomings so that your staff are free to do the important work of alumni engagement. Our mobile apps provide a platform for alumni networking and social media connectivity before and after the event, and are integration ready for a seamless user experience. Find out more at countermarch.com/reunions. All right. So, I'm always excited to put on an Advancement Live show for everybody, but I've had this date on my calendar for a long time. I really have. And, getting John and Dan on the show, we booked this a couple months out, and these are busy guys, particularly John, who we did a little technology test yesterday. And he did it, I think it was West Coast time, John, and it was probably, at 5 in the morning your time? And I think you were headed...
Sounds about right.
Yeah, you were headed to Phoenix for the day, and I think I saw that you did a presentation at Thunderbird, and so that I'm sure was an awesome day. But to get us sort of started, John, let me read your bio here. John Hill is LinkedIn's higher education evangelist. He's traveled all over the world speaking to colleges and universities about building networks and connecting people. Prior to LinkedIn, John was the director of alumni career services at his alma mater, Michigan State University. John, can you tell us a little bit about LinkedIn's higher education evangelist position, and what does a higher education evangelist do on a daily basis? How do you work with universities around the world?
Yeah, as you can imagine, Ryan, the term evangelist in your title is a conversation starter. So it's good to have, also needs lots of explanation. I think the best way to position it is I'm an educator and communicator about what LinkedIn is doing in the higher education sphere. And the best way that I know how to present that is actually in person, connecting with people, particularly faculty and staff on campuses, on how to aggregate audience, target market, communicate, qualify developmental leads, engage alumni, redefine the job search to students and alumni. So over the course of the last 2+ years, I've been to 87 of the top 100 U.S. institutions. I've been to 147 of the Global 400 schools. I have spoken at 110 conferences, and it's been a whirlwind, but it's been a great whirlwind. And the most important thing to me is I'm a higher education-centric voice for our product team at LinkedIn who are working on higher education initiatives.
Yeah, so you've had a chance to travel all around the globe, all around the country, and you've had a chance to chat with a lot of people about alumni engagement. And your background is alumni career services, and could you talk a little bit about how LinkedIn has really changed the way people think about alumni career services and maybe even alumni engagement in general? What have you guys been able to do through LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'll actually go through very quickly what we developed as a team to be effective in higher education. Essentially, we've tackled 4 dominoes so far. The first thing that we did as a team is add additional areas for students to put on their profile. What we found were that students had very empty spaces within their LinkedIn profile because it was heavily weighted towards work experience. So we created what we call student verticals, the ability for students to capture classroom experience and put on their professional identity of record, their LinkedIn profile, showcase a little bit broader what they were learning, which was totally applicable to the job search for recruiters and HR. So things like courses and publications, GPA, any kind of thing that you can do in the classroom that could apply to their identity of record. Second, we worked on is standardizing university data globally. So early on, if you were to type in the university, we use Dan as an example, Syracuse. You could put Syracuse University, you could put Syracuse as the school. For the user, it's the same school. For data, it's 2 different schools. For faculty and staff to access that data, it's 2 different schools. So we've worked on the first global indexing of institutions. We've identified 23,000 universities that we have appreciable data sets on, and now they all have unique identifiers, which allowed us to create the third thing, which was the alumni tool. It shows alumni of an institution by where they live, where they work, what they do. That's at www.linkedin.com/alumni. Great case of how you can unbelievably useful access to insights on their launch we did in August. They are a new system for higher education globally, combining both insights for the user perspective, but also the ability to brand manage, communicate, see deeper insights from an institutional level as an admin. So it gives you an idea of the ticks that we've taken. Still call the foundational phase, but we've done our due diligence. We've partnered with a lot of
And we are losing John just a little bit in terms of sound. John, can you still hear us okay? Awesome. Let me see if we can get John back. You gotta love free technology. John, you still with us? I can't hear you right at this moment, so maybe if I could get you to re-enter the Google Hangout, John, if you can still hear us. Hey, Dan, how's it going?
Hey, Ryan, I'm doing well. How are you?
Yep.
I'm doing great. One of my favorite parts about doing Advancement Live is you never know what you're going to get on any given show. Mm-hmm. But, you know, one of the things that you and I were going to talk about, of course, is sort of how Syracuse University and particularly how you, as the Director of Young Alumni Engagement, are utilizing the LinkedIn platform. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, John, I was asking Dan to jump in about how Syracuse is using LinkedIn for young alumni engagement, and then we'll chime back over to you. Can you still hear us, John?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you. So Dan, young alumni engagement and LinkedIn, and then we'll click back over to John.
Sure. Well, kind of broadly speaking, I think that LinkedIn has really changed the shape of alumni relations in general, in that there are no longer just private alumni directories that we as staff members hold on to and have to dispense contacts. All of the information is really out there. All of our alums' contact information is out there on LinkedIn, and for any resourceful young alum or older alum, it's possible to reach out. So in terms of young alumni engagement, we really see our role as education and training. So for instance, we host workshops, we host events focusing on how to use LinkedIn, what's the proper etiquette of reaching out on LinkedIn, how to network appropriately. And so that kind of frees us up, instead of playing the role of dispensing contacts and making one-to-one introductions. It frees us up to kind of build programs to enrich the community on a larger level, and to offer that education and training, and that's been really well received so far.
Thanks, Dan. And I think one of the big pieces, John, of course, about what you do around the world is that education and training piece. I've watched a few of your presentations with students and alumni on YouTube, thinking about sort of the 3 pillars that you sort of use in your presentations, which is building your network before you need it, quality over quantity, and sort of dream big. Based on those concepts, how do you teach people to use LinkedIn, and what should we be teaching alumni and how they should be using LinkedIn? Still some. Awesome. John, we're still up there, sort of. You are. Can you hear us? Okay, John.
Yeah, I can hear you, Ryan. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You're going in a little bit, but did you hear my question about sort of the 3 pillars?
Yeah, as far as how to effectively utilize LinkedIn from a alumni perspective.
Yeah, build your network, quality over quantity, and dream big.
Yeah. So I've essentially simplified the best effective way to networking is an environment like LinkedIn, and actually offline now, into 3 simple steps. Build a network before you need it, so it's there when you do. It was actually a principle I learned when I was at Michigan State University. We were during the recession, 260, 80 miles away from the automotive industry, and all those people had built networks that really revolved around the automotive industry, so that when younger, they didn't have ready-made opportunities to connect with people outside of that industry. So helping them learn how to do that was important, but I think giving students and alumni a leg up by doing it early on.
Hey, John, do you have a set of headphones that you could plug in to the system, to your computer?
Hold tight. Talk to Dan for a little bit.
Yeah, let's see if we can get John squared away with some headphones, and I think that was part of the problem. It might be going in and out because of some background noise. Dan, let's talk a little bit about the Lumen House in New York. Sort of switching gears a little bit. You guys are in New York City, or a satellite office. And how is it that the Lumen House came to be sort of a headquarters for you guys in New York City? And how was the decision making to create a new position? I think you mentioned for Director of Young Alumni Engagement, which is your position.
Sure. Well, the Lumen House is based here in Manhattan, in Midtown Manhattan. And I think it's important to point out that Syracuse has 57,000 alumni in the New York metro region, which is almost a quarter of its total alumni population. So in terms of the rationale behind having an alumni center in New York, it comes down to the numbers, really, because so much of our alumni population is based here in New York. In terms of what we have to offer, we're mainly an advancement operation, so we have a special events staff, we have alumni relations and donor relations, we have development officers, communications and public relations, and pretty much on a daily basis here in New York, we're offering different events and programs for our alumni. The various schools at SU and programs at SU frequently visit the city to offer programming here at Lumen House. And we also have an admissions office based at Lumen House to interview prospective students in the area. In terms of my role here, I focus on young alumni engagement. And one thing we realized, the university realized over the last couple of years, is that we have so many young alumni who are moving to New York specifically, and they don't necessarily keep in great touch with the university because there's not necessarily a constant flow of relevant programming for them here in New York. And so eventually my position was created. I was very fortunate that it was a newly created position, so I've kind of had a hand in shaping some of the goals and the outcomes and all of that. And my kind of at a very high level, my goal is to build a community of young alumni who feel supported and who feel engaged by the university, a community who values the SU network and who values the university resources, and also a community who gives back to the university of their time, their skill, their dollars. So basically trying to create this community that understands the two-way relationship between the alum and the institution.
Yeah, and so, in creating your community, Dan, in New York City, how is it that it was framed up to sort of do that specifically in New York City? I think I noticed that there was another office in London. Didn't I see that as far as Syracuse's outreach?
Yes.
Do you guys have sort of is there a person in London, director of young alumni engagement in that office, and do you guys sort of share, the best practice, shall we say?
Sure, that's a really good question. We actually have offices in London as well as throughout Europe, but we have several offices here in the U.S. So there's an SU in LA Center, SU in Washington, D.C., the Greenberg House, increasing presence in various locations. We do have alumni relations professionals in D.C. as well as in Los Angeles. At this time, I'm not sure if there's someone specifically based in London focusing on young alumni engagement. But within the U.S., we do have several alumni relations professionals, and we keep in close contact just in terms of sharing best practices. Now, the alumni out in LA probably have very different needs from the alumni in New York, from the alumni in DC. So we don't always replicate the exact programming in those locations, but we have found that some things tend to work, across different regions.
Awesome, and I think that as you were talking about, as we were doing a little prep for the show, you sort of talked about the changing role of alumni relations in career services, the fact universities are no longer sort of this private directory list, and it's now sort of an open, growing, thriving community that's all out there in the public.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the connection there, with LinkedIn and some of your work?
Yeah, well, I think alumni relations offices have been freed up to really create value for the alumni populations instead of working on kind of the very base level, maintaining directories, which I'm sure that still happens, and maintaining club relationships. That's all very important. But in addition to that, alumni relations offices now can focus on enriching the alumni community and building value. For my position here in New York, the first thing that I did when I started, I went and met with young alumni one-on-one, and I asked them, what would be beneficial for you? What do you need in your life? Take SU out of the equation totally. It doesn't have to be related to the university at all. And what do you need in your life? And they were saying things like, we could use help finding an apartment. We could use help creating a budget for a young professional living in New York City. We can use help with career networking, and all these other topics. And so what we basically did here at Lumen House, we built programming around the alumni needs. So for the apartment, the apartment idea, we had a Syracuse alumnus who is a real estate agent come in and talk about how to find an apartment in Manhattan. For the money management thing, we had a Syracuse alumnus who's a personal financial consultant come in and talk about budgeting and how to live in New York on an entry-level salary, which is quite a feat, and things like that. So the whole time we kind of weaved our alumni experts into the programming, and continue to emphasize the importance of the SU network and how we're providing all of this value for our alumni.
That's awesome. And when you started the role, how did you really go about receiving the feedback in terms of what alumni wanted? Was this both survey and sort of anecdotal evidence? How did you go about connecting with people?
Yeah, well, what I did was I identified various alumni leaders, and so that might have been people who were very active on campus during their time at SU, and I just sent them an email and said, hey, I'd love to meet with you and just hear about your experience as an alum of Syracuse. I know that you were a campus tour guide or an orientation leader or something else on campus. I'm curious to hear how that's translated after and what we can do for you. And the common feedback that I heard was that they really hadn't been engaged very much during their alumni years, and they were very happy to meet with me and to offer some feedback.
Yeah, I think oftentimes it's just about asking the questions and really asking what it is that they want, as opposed to trying to come up with programs that are really university-centric as opposed to alumni-centric. Mm-hmm. I think I see John Hill back with us. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, now I'm on an iPad.
Yeah, you have switched locations, and you're looking good, you're sounding good. We got the sweater vest and the hoodie all back in play. It's nice to see you. And so I was talking with Dan, John, about how Syracuse University really kind of went into New York City and tried to discover what it was that alumni wanted and develop programming in New York City based around those needs. And one of the things I wanted to see if you could chat with us a little bit about is back to that idea of providing programming and teaching these ideas about how to build your network before you need it. What is that? What makes a great network? This quality over quantity idea, and then teaching people to dream big about what it is that they could be doing and how to use their network.
Yeah. So where I was going before on that, build your network before you need it, so it's there when you do. I was the director of alumni career services at Michigan State University when the recession hit. And we had well over 200,000 alumni in the state of Michigan, 80 miles away from the automotive industry, which absolutely imploded. Vast majority of the people in the state of Michigan were working around the automotive industry, which meant that their networks were very insular. They were associated with that industry, so when they needed to find jobs outside of that industry, they struggled. So that was a learning that I took from that environment and applied it globally. And I just think it's a good reinforcing idea for students and alumni to make sure that they're always kind of gardening their relationships and making sure that their network is as strong as possible. The second thing, the quality affiliation as opposed to quantity, or quality relational network as opposed to quantity. Social media in general has conditioned us to connect with somebody even on just kind of the passing connectivity. And the interesting thing about LinkedIn is it's really where business takes place, but where the strength is not necessarily on your direct relationships, it's on your connection of a connection, those second-level connections. Those are what are defined as weak ties, and vast majority of job opportunities through relational networking happen out of those people. So if you have quality first-level relationships, it helps you connect into those second-level connections. There are 4 major affiliations that I share that we've seen that are effective in building a quality relational network. Number 1 is friends and family. Number 2, and we see a high velocity, which is why we have an initiative around this, is university affiliations. Number 3 is shared work experience. And number 4 is volunteerism, board work, committee work for students, student groups, fraternal organizations, things like that. And then the last thing, we have insights on career outcomes for 240 million people. That's a lot. And the beautiful thing about that is you can see the progression that people took to get into the high-level positions they're in now or the industries that they're in now. As a student, it becomes aspirational. You can follow in the footprints of, say, a UVA alum who's reached high attainment, or follow in the footsteps of a Syracuse alum in New York City that is doing what you want to do 10, 15 years down the road. And it almost expedites the success pattern because you actually have that pathway in front of you. But that aspirational dream big, you have one life, and if you're going to go for it, we give great insights to help you get there.
And I think that one of my favorite parts about using LinkedIn is going in and discovering who's out there doing what. Sometimes when I'm in the last sort of hour of the evening before I head up to bed, I'm cruising around LinkedIn, sort of looking at profiles and see what cool stuff people are up to. One of the things I love also sort of thinking about is the idea of personal branding, John, and I think that is one of my favorite potential futures of alumni engagement is helping alumni develop their own personal brands to stand out and become more searchable on the web. I discovered, sort of a quote from one of your presentations that said, "Personal branding is the future job currency." Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that, and how universities could feasibly help develop people's individual brands, or just understanding personal branding in general?
Yeah, so I'll step back and kind of reframe it for the two of you. I met Dan online first, viewed what he was sharing and how he was connecting with people on Twitter, and he and I connected that way. Ryan, same way. You were doing social media before UVA with other institutions, and it was easy to track who you were and what you were about. It gave me a vantage point on kind of what you were developing as a brand around content that you were sharing. So it gave me an idea that, I could connect with Dan offline and we could have really robust conversation because we shared similar ideas online. And that concept has really started to jump into recruitment and HR, so the vetting and sourcing of candidates. If you think about what's on your LinkedIn profile right now, you have essentially an online resume or CV. You couple that with the content that you're sharing in your respective networks, it gives a pretty robust view of who you are. For somebody who's trying to source you as somebody into a job, it gives them with high degree of probability the idea that you are a good fit for that. That hasn't been refined to the point where they can just click a button and say this is the person we need for this position, but I can see that happening. And we're probably 4 or 5 years out. And the funny thing is, one of the biggest lightning rods that we have on LinkedIn are endorsements. And partly because, if I ask the two of you, how many times have you been endorsed by somebody in your network who has no idea you have the skill or expertise that they're endorsing you for? That's something that we're still working on. But if you think about it in aggregate, if you look at like the first 4 or 5 things that you're getting heavily endorsed for, they really define what your personal professional brand is through your network. And if I use myself as an example, if today I applied for a job at LinkedIn as a higher education evangelist, I could put on a resume all the quantifiable data that would show I could be successful. I could put, or in the interview, I could orally talk about how I could be successful in this position. I could get a list of references that would back me up. But if they went to my LinkedIn profile now and they looked at endorsements and I wasn't endorsed for public speaking or social networking or social media or LinkedIn, that would be a red flag for the company now. And we're just starting to see that, but that's where we're progressing. Now, I will say the number one thing that I see people make mistakes on their LinkedIn profile is they emulate their resume to a T. So they replicate it exactly. The reality is a lot of people are sourcing you not only from your resume, but also your LinkedIn profile, which means that if you're not putting additional information or showcasing more of who you are as a professional on your LinkedIn profile, you're missing out on a chance to second sell yourself. And that's something I think from a higher education perspective, specifically Alumni Career Services, we need to be really, really effective of helping our alumni understand that point.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, and it also comes down to the idea of, what is it that people will find when it is that they're searching for you or looking for you. And, when people search and find someone's LinkedIn profile, what's there and what else is there that backs up those particular components of a LinkedIn profile. Do you think that a university should invest in staff that specific function, perhaps this is part of Alumni Career Services, perhaps additional, that's all about personal branding and helping alumni figure out how to position themselves as thought leaders in the digital space?
Yeah, so when I look at career services specifically, and that's where I cut my teeth in higher education, we're still really heavily vetted in the older aspects of the job search. So every university that I've come across does resume reviews, but very few do, say, personal branding reviews. And really, I'll take a step back from that. I think at this point, we would all agree that LinkedIn is important as part of your professional career, and it's an important online identity of you. Yet there aren't a lot of schools that are doing LinkedIn reviews specifically. Take it to that next step on personal branding, which is where the job search is progressing to. We're not at that point where we're accurately helping our students and alumni meet the job search of 4 or 5 years from now. We're actually reactive in a lot of ways, or behind in the process. So I think it's not only critical, I think that trying to find people who can help navigate the job search going forward is going to be vital for universities to make sure that they're connecting their students and alumni to the right jobs and opportunities.
Yeah, and I think that, part of obviously the opportunity that we have here as employees of universities is to sort of help facilitate the process of being found and being found for the components that are on people's profiles. And one of the things that I often think about in my position is how all that information on a LinkedIn profile, how could we use this for our own purposes, right? I mean, you guys have more data in your database about alumni that's probably significantly more current than we have. Now, if you had a couple of recommendations for sort of advancement services pros in terms of using LinkedIn data to update our fundraising systems, what would you tell folks in terms of how they could potentially use it to cross that data and maybe double check it? Perhaps it's more current.
Yeah, so I think that I would rarely get an argument from people in fundraising or development right now that we have better career data than the institutions themselves have. And if you look at something like the alumni tool, so again, www.linkedin.com/alumni, there are just incredible aggregate reads of your alumni base and their success in industry and company. So for instance, just at a top level, if I've defaulted to, say, 1900 to 2020, and I can see the universe of students and alumni, I've got a list of the top 25 companies that employ my alumni. That's a lead list for corporate engagement. And then it's defined by every city in the world. So now I've got a lead list of by every city. I can regionalize the top targets to go after on that side. Same for career development. Gives me a lead list of the people to go after for career fairs. Say we're trying to support a entrepreneurial program on campus. If I go down below the boxes that resolve on where they live, where they work, and what they do on the alumni tool, there's a search box. I could put something in like venture capital, and I could see all the people who are giving money to entrepreneurs who attended my university. That's a lead list for people who would support an entrepreneurial program on campus. For alumni engagement, I could use engagement terms in that box like music or athletics and see the propensity by region of our alumni to have interest in that, and then start to laser focus alumni programs based on the market, based on data. Those are just some aggregate ways to view this, and so many more, Ryan. But if you think about what I just crossed, I've just given you something for alumni, for development, for career services, in a very quick synopsis. And I think broader than that, if I look at marketing, communication, PR, social, if you look at university pages, which we launched in August, they have admin rights that allow you to do targeted status updates to all your students and alumni that are auto-followed. Now you have the ability to communicate to them and connect them with other communities that you want to attach them to. We hope that those are LinkedIn groups, but still, you have the ability to focus them in the spaces that you want to connect to, and name another social medium that auto-follows your students and alumni for you as an institution. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the launch of university pages was a really amazing milestone, and just being sort of a part of the lead up, it was great to watch it unfold. Could you talk a little bit about the need for university pages, perhaps some of the differences between university pages and groups, some of the value, perhaps they're totally different? And then there's also some criticism out there, or maybe just sort of not knowing what to do with university pages that says, that's just like LinkedIn's version of a Facebook page. What is it that we should do here with a university page? And is that criticism completely off base or warranted? What are your thoughts, John?
Yeah, I think whenever you launch something new, you're going to hear something out there about it in a way that can probably be represented better through discussion. That's why I'm appreciative of the forum that you opened up here, Ryan. If you think about university pages, we had higher education under the company page ecosystem, and there's not a university that's listening to this right now that considers themselves a company. There's not a university here that considers what they do product and service. So that space was not accurately reflecting universities, and then they were tricking the system to use it for brand management. The reality is company pages were meant to be brand management for the company as an employer. So it was a way for them to position jobs and opportunities to people who wanted to attach to the brand. That's still important for the universities. You still hire at a high level, but you needed that space that captured the ethos of higher education, which is the pursuit of knowledge. That's what the university page affords you to do. You have a community wall where through content you can showcase what the institution's about. Secondly, the LinkedIn tool finds a home. So now you have deep insights of an institution that the user can view, and we're still user first, which coincides with things like notable alumni or similar schools. It becomes a very user-first friendly space. But on the back end, there are administrative controls where we turn off the network restrictions for faculty and staff that are admins, allowing them to see all their students and alumni. Essentially, what we say is we're giving them their biological children back. And then additionally, we allow them to communicate to those people that we've auto-followed directly to that page, which allows them to start to resolve information as an institution in their network update stream. And again, that's targeted, so you can bring that down to specific subsets of alumni for Dan, young alumni in New York, if he wanted to. And you know, if you think about the value prop to that, you know, it's far more, to me, it's an investment of a higher education initiative through LinkedIn to walk hand in hand with the institutions. I think the difficulty is we've positioned everything as collaborative and as a partnership, and it's hard for institutions to view it that way, but really it's a win-win scenario. You get better opportunities to communicate deeper insights on your alumni and students. We're a growth initiative, so if you connect more students and alumni to university pages, it's a win-win, and that's what we're looking at out of this.
Yeah, and have you received some feedback so far about university pages, John? Both, you know, sort of both the good and the bad. And I saw a request from Omar, I think, the other day for some testimonials about, you know, using it, and are there some success stories out there? What's been the overall feedback?
Yeah, I think it's been positive, and I think one of the ways that you can map feedback is by adoption. We launched with 200 universities. Both your universities were attached to that group. And within 4 weeks, we had over 1,000 university pages. And you know, if you think about the cohort of schools that you have that you compare yourself against, you're talking about 5-10 schools that you think of on a regular basis, or maybe 50 or 100. And we have over 1,000 that are in this space. For the user, the more universities that we have, the more global this ecosystem becomes, the better insights they have on making decisions of what school to go to. And then for you, more students and alumni that connect into that page, another communication vehicle that you have that you can target directly into a space that more reflects universities, which is a professional network.
Yeah, and I think you know, there's definitely opportunities in different realms. One of the questions, and specifically in LinkedIn, one of the questions I had for Dan, who was going to answer it later on in the show until we sort of got a little discombobulated, was, Dan, did you have any sort of thoughts about LinkedIn and what they could potentially offer you to better serve your alumni?
Yeah, well, I think, first off, I think the university pages, I think the university page for Syracuse has been incredible, and I think being able to target messaging to alumni in specific locations and specific job functions and specific levels of seniority and all of that has really been helpful for Syracuse. In terms of other things that LinkedIn could offer, I was always curious about possibly connecting the event experience to LinkedIn in somehow. So for instance, we always have alumni networking events where we have 50, 100, 150 people, and afterwards I'll receive messages asking me, you know, who was such and such who worked at American Express who was there the other night, or can you introduce me to Bob who works at JP Morgan Chase, or asking for all these kind of introductions and follow-up information. You know, I think it would be interesting to kind of attach LinkedIn to the event experience so individuals could directly see the LinkedIn profiles of fellow event attendees and then follow up afterwards. So there might actually already be a way to do that through some side service or something. I'm not sure, but I think that would be really valuable.
And John, I was just going to add, you know, that there are a bunch of companies out there, of course, who have LinkedIn APIs, and I mean that's sort of a part of the question as well. Maybe a two-parter here. One is, you know, is the future of LinkedIn, what are some of the things? Does that include events, some sort of interaction with events? And then maybe you could answer for everybody sort of how LinkedIn goes about the API process. I get a chance to demo a lot of products out there that have LinkedIn integration in some way, shape, or form.
Yep. So I would say that APIs are, well, I can tell you this, they're already in existence through some of the products that you're talking about. So for instance, one of the sponsors of the show, iModules, has a co-registration authentication application through LinkedIn. And what it allows you to do is have the user, your alumni, opt in to your network or authenticate to your network through their LinkedIn profile. There's definitely room there in the future. Right now, we're focused on the foundation, and university pages are the foundation, and we're still in the early iterations of that. And I think that that's one of the other things, to your point earlier, Ryan, where you were saying there's comparative to other social media spaces for higher education to university pages. The reality is we're different, and we're also a little bit later in the stages of putting something like this out because we wanted to make it the right product. Part of that is by getting the feedback from the institution. So we had a beta test program where we worked with specific universities that gave us feedback, and we iterated based on that. I think part of it is building that foundation on the right data. And so I go back to the standardization of that university data, what I was reflecting early on. The fact that we have created unique identifiers for 23,000 universities globally, can slot your students and alumni in it and then break them down by what companies they work for, where they live, or what industries they're in, or what they studied. That's based on doing the right steps and then working in collaboration with the institutions to launch something like this. So, future forward, I think you're probably in the right ballpark. The one thing to remember for us is our terms of service is user first. And I often get asked as I'm presenting, will you give us all your data? And I laugh at
Please.
that. But yeah. So generally what I say is, will you give me all your alumni data? And we'll do a handshake right now. And nobody's ever taken me up on that offer. But the reality is we're both in the game of protecting our people. And for us, it's our users. And we've got 780,000 CEOs in the US that have a profile on LinkedIn. If we're giving their data away, they'll leave. If they leave, we fold in on ourselves. So, we've got to be highly protective of that. On the flip side, same thing for you. Your alumni respect that you're going to be careful with their data and how you approach them. And so we've got to walk through this in a collaborative way to figure out the best end result for the user, which is your alum and our profile owner.
John, one of the questions that was posed through Twitter, I think I saw it over the weekend actually in preparation for the show, and since I've got the LinkedIn expert, it would definitely behoove me to ask you, can you talk about what you see as best practices for LinkedIn groups? I think one of the things that I saw the other day, the question was, what would you recommend to a university that's considering whether or not to pull down a comment that is sort of anti-institution of some sort? Where's the recommendation from the expert?
So you're talking to the wrong guy for that one. I graduated with a journalism degree, and I believe in open discourse, and I believe that higher education was built on open discourse, so that if you start muting some of the voices that are dissenting against you, I think you're going against the grain of higher education. That being said, everybody has their own policy on how they navigate communities. What I will say, those communities are incredible because there are people who have selected to join your brand, to reattach to your brand. Students and alumni have raised their hand to say, I have interest. To me, it's an indicator of interest to connect back to the institution. It's up to the university to figure out how to connect them back. But I think, like for Dan, young alumni engagement is a way for career services, connecting those people into experiential opportunities to be mentors for job shadowing or for site visits, for networking with students, connecting them back to the time, talent, and treasure continuum. These are people who have opted in, who have raised their hand. Now, some of the best practices that I've seen with groups have to do with enabling the group members to be part of who crafts the content of that space, that community. And so, for instance, I'm a big advocate of creating what I call content ambassadors, finding your alumni who are posting good content and enabling them, creating them as moderators within the group. which means they can't make any appreciable change, but you've upgraded them in the eyes of other people, and saying to them, hey, we'd love you to regularly contribute the kind of content that you're contributing. What it does is it keeps the space evergreen with content, takes off some of the productivity on you of having to keep that space evergreen, and then they feel like they're tied back to the institution. And in my mind, that's a better gift back to the institution than attending an event. So, you know, and you find that those people will be quicker to respond to other people, and then it's a peer-to-peer network. I think the other opportunity you have is to poll your members on institutional matters. These are your students and alumni. You have a group that's associated with that. I will tell you, one of the reasons we created the community wall is because that is an insular group that you vet off your back-end database. So you were talking to people who have already gone through your school. We needed to open up the door for you to talk to everybody that wanted to attach with the institutional brand, prospective students, parents, external stakeholders. But if you have that insular group, these are people who love the brand. Help them shape what you do as far as marketing or engagement or communication or development or career services.
John, sort of a thought about the brand and folks like myself and Dan who want to sort of who recognize the ideas here across the board when it comes to content. When I look at LinkedIn, I see a lot of content that's up on your site that's from CEOs, people that are further down the business track, have these incredible vantage points from the very top. But it doesn't necessarily always resonate to me as someone who's sort of middle management in my mid-30s. And how could someone like Dan and I participate at a more significant level, or everyone else who's out there in higher ed? How could we be a part of the whole content that's available on LinkedIn to digest?
Yeah. So you're talking about the influencers?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I think a couple things you can do. I'm more than open to being a vehicle into the folks that make the determination of who is an influencer, to share what higher ed voices you'd like to be involved in that. We have a higher education channel, and I think both of you know that there are some really good voices, people who craft good stories around higher education, who come from the bricks and mortar institutions, who want to represent that space as the value which it is. I think secondarily, we go back to that aspect of personal branding. If you think about that status update that you have on LinkedIn, it's the ability to feed content and really reinforce your brand through that content to your network of people. And for people like us, the three of us, we're connected heavily in higher education. It's a good way to kind of share some of the good content that's cycling in and out. You know, this is a perfect example of what you're doing here, Ryan, which is connecting LinkedIn to an audience through another medium and expanding kind of our connectivity to the space. I think vice versa. I think about some of the communities within LinkedIn, like the Alumni and Advancement Professionals group, or the CASE group, or the NACE group. Those are great places to you know, try to open up that discourse, try to have cross-communication, learn from best practices, and kind of view the state of content in higher education in your respective areas within the institution.
Dan, content at Syracuse, young alumni engagement, you know, a lot of people don't have a lot of money to give when they're a young alumni. One of the things that they can do is give content, right? Photos, editorials, you know, what is the way, how would you suggest that folks perhaps are participating, engaging with Syracuse University from a content standpoint?
Sure. Well, one of the things we recently did, myself and two of my colleagues on the SU campus, Sam Edelstein and Kim Brown. Sam is in the Alumni Relations Office, Kim is in the Career Services Office. We relaunched the Generation Orange social media platforms. Generation Orange is Syracuse's young alumni brand. And what we've really used those platforms for is to showcase the voices and the experiences and the accomplishments of our alumni. So whereas the main Syracuse Twitter channel might not retweet every single photo or every single, you know, tweet that's sent in from a young alum, it might not quite be on that level. What we'd like to do, or what we aim to do with the Generation Orange channels, is really showcase what our alumni are doing. So if they come back to campus for homecoming and want to show off a picture, that's something we would retweet. If they, just find a new job or have some major accomplishment in their life, if they send that to the Generation Orange Twitter handle or the Facebook page, we'll go ahead and share that. So we really see ourselves as kind of amplifying the voices of our young alumni in the digital space. That was one of the decisions we made in restarting those channels, is that our young alumni might not be at the point in their careers where a new job is broadcast on the main university channels or sent out via special email, but it's certainly worthy of being included and applauded in some ways, and so that's why we use the Generation Orange channels.
And I think one of the other things I love about Syracuse's work is your colleague Kim Brown with the Slice of Advice, and she had done the Working Orange handle too, yes. Right? There was some really good work being done there, getting alumni to tweet during the course of the day and participate in that respect. John, can you offer our listeners sort of a final thought in terms of what we can expect from university pages and a few things that we could get excited about the future of working with LinkedIn and using LinkedIn?
Yeah, so before we get there, Ryan, there was a question on Twitter I just wanted to answer real quick.
Yeah, great.
Somebody had a question about the alumni tool and where you find majors. We're actually categorizing it as field of study. But if you go to the alumni tool, there's a little grayed out area on the right-hand side that looks like an arrow. If you click on that arrow, it takes you to field of study, what they're skilled at, and how they're connected, which gives you the access to 3 more facets. So that's the way that you access it. Future forward, I think what we're definitely trying to do is build out this ecosystem within higher education, make it robust globally. There's still a lot of relational work that needs to go into that. So I'm picking up the phone, talking to some of the institutions that haven't adopted yet, trying to find out why. Part of that process will help us with potentially iterating the product even further to match those needs. If you think about developing a global ecosystem, it's not an easy thing, and we're only talking about month 3, so it's still relatively new. But we'll continue to push forward. I love higher education because it's like we roll something out, we're all excited about it, and you're like, what's next? But we're aware that we can go quite a ways within this space. Again, I go back to me, it's like a beautiful relationship. I come out of higher education. I definitely align with higher education at a high level. I don't have any family in Silicon Valley other than my wife and kids. We moved out here because we believed in what this initiative was about, but most importantly, we believed in what higher education was about. And our product team, I think, is reflecting that in everything that we've done thus far. Know that we have meetings every day where we talk about things that just kind of blow your mind that you could actually accomplish. And I think that there are huge opportunities. At the end of the day, I'm in the Maserati, which is LinkedIn, on the superhighway going 135 miles an hour, building the car as we're going. And I'm trying to connect to higher education, which happens to be in the horse-drawn wagon on the dirt-covered road, going about 1.5 miles a day. But I've learned to love that aspect of higher education because it's an industry that's been around for 600-700 years, and there's a reason for that, and it doesn't bend to the whims of the day, which means that us as a company, we have to make sure that we're respective of what higher education is. And I think we've done that with the work that we've done both in person and online, and we'll continue to reflect that. And for both of you guys, I've got to jump off the phone. I got to go into a meeting, but yeah. I thank you. More than happy to do this again, Ryan. Dan, I know we'll see each other coming up. So best of luck to you guys, to everybody listening. Happy to connect and talk further. I think these guys will tell you. I'm sometimes hard to track down, but when you do, you always get a good conversation. So
no, you're not hard to track down, John. You're not hard. Thank you so much for your time and energy. We really appreciate it, John.
All right. Hey, thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye now. Dan, that was great. And sort of a final thought from your vantage point, what are some ideal outcomes from your role as a young alumni engagement professional, looking down the road? If money was no object, what are some of the things that you'd implement in order to be successful, both in the digital space and maybe outside of it?
Sure. Well, I think Very generally speaking, young alumni engagement, it starts with student engagement on campus. So I think that in a perfect world, if I had all the resources and all the money to make this happen, I would create a very strong student engagement program. The day that students step foot on the Syracuse campus, they would see alumni role models, they would be exposed to our entire network of alumni who give back to the university in various ways. And so I think it would really start with the student experience. And then from then on, what I see as an ideal outcome of this position is 3 or 5 years down the road, I would like to see all Syracuse alumni giving back to SU in some way. And that can take many forms. That can be giving back of their time, hosting an event at their workplace, sending along a job lead to a Syracuse student or a recent graduate, or giving back financially. So I guess those are kind of like the big picture outcomes that I see. And it's just a matter of kind of getting to that next step, putting strategies in place to get to that next step.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dan, for being on the show today. Just a final plug from one of our sponsors. This month, M. Stoner, a marketing and communications agency focused on higher education web strategy and development since 2001, is presenting an advanced web analytics webinar. This professional development opportunity is perfect for marketing and communications managers and directors who want to learn how analytics can inform their online strategies, and for senior communications professionals, directors, and vice presidents who want to strengthen their understanding of Google Analytics. I tweeted out that link some time ago. It had been my intention of making that sponsor plug in the middle of the show, but we did not have sort of 2 defined segments. But if you look back in the Twitter stream, you'll see that link there. And just a sort of plug for a show that I'm working on for next week. I have 2 really awesome alumni relations professionals from Australia. That's Tracy Beck from the University of Sydney and Leonie Boxtel from the University of Melbourne, both of whom will be on the show. That's 10 p.m. live Monday evening, so that it is at noon lunchtime over in Australia on Tuesday. So it is a little bit tricky to try to have a show with some folks who are on the other side of the world, but we're going to take a crack at it. And so if you are around, mark your calendars for the late night show, 10 p.m. Monday evening. And otherwise, we'll definitely promote the show and its rebroadcast on Tuesday, normal time. Anyway, my name is Ryan Catherwood, again coming to you live from the grounds of the University of Virginia. Don't hesitate to reach out, connect on LinkedIn, or follow me on Twitter at Ryan Catherwood. It was a pleasure today. Thanks for sticking with us through the technical difficulties. I think it was a great show. Hope you all enjoyed it. Have a good afternoon.